They came with tanks. Patton answered with steel, fire, and discipline. At dawn on March 23, 1943, the desert around El Guettar, Tunisia, was eerily silent. The wind swept across dry wadis and rocky hills, carrying nothing but dust and the distant rumble of engines. American soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division, the legendary Big Red One, stood behind their defensive lines, weapons ready, eyes fixed on the horizon. They knew what was coming. Across the barren plain, German armor was moving. Veteran Panzer units, hardened by years of combat in Europe and North Africa, were advancing with a single mission: break the American line and push the Allies back into the desert. For the U.S. Army, still recovering from the humiliation of Kasserine Pass, this was more than just another battle. It was a test of survival, a test of leadership, and above all, a test of General George S. Patton. If El Guettar fell, the reputation of the American Army, and Patton himself, might never recover. The strategic situation in North Africa. By early 1943, the North African campaign had reached a critical phase. The Allied landings in Operation Torch had brought American and British forces into Algeria and Morocco, but the road east into Tunisia was blocked by seasoned Axis troops. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, had already inflicted a devastating defeat on U.S. forces at Kasserine Pass in February. Poor leadership, weak discipline, and lack of coordination had exposed the inexperience of the American Army. The shock was so severe that Allied command made drastic changes. George S. Patton was brought in. Known for his fiery speeches, strict discipline, and obsession with combat readiness, Patton was tasked with restoring order, confidence, and effectiveness to the U.S. II Corps. His message was simple: we are not retreating anymore. El Guettar would be the first real opportunity for Patton's reformed army to prove itself. Why El Guettar mattered? El Guettar was a narrow valley south of the Atlas Mountains, guarding key routes toward the Tunisian coast. If Axis forces broke through here, they could threaten Allied supply lines and delay the final push against German positions in Tunisia. Patton ordered the 1st Infantry Division to hold the valley at all costs. Their mission: block the German advance, destroy enemy armor, prove the U.S. Army could fight on equal terms. Waiting for them were units of the 10th Panzer Division, supported by Italian forces. These were not second-rate troops. They were experienced, disciplined, and confident. The stage was set for a brutal confrontation. Preparing the defense. Patton personally oversaw the defensive preparations. He demanded strong artillery positions, well-camouflaged anti-tank guns, clear fields of fire, rigid discipline. American engineers built obstacles, minefields, and defensive trenches across the valley. Infantry units dug in along rocky ridges. Artillery batteries were carefully placed to create deadly crossfire zones. Patton emphasized one key rule: hold your ground. No retreat. Unlike Kasserine, where confusion and panic had led to collapse, El Guettar would be fought on Patton's terms. The German attack begins. On the morning of March 23, German tanks rode forward in formation. Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks advanced behind waves of infantry. Their goal was to smash through the American defenses and open the road north. The Americans waited. When the tanks entered the kill zone, U.S. artillery roared to life. Shells slammed into the valley floor. Explosions tore through German formations. Smoke and dust filled the air. Anti-tank guns opened fire, punching holes in German armor. For the first time in North Africa, American forces were not retreating. They were standing their ground. A clash of armor. The Germans pressed forward despite heavy losses. Tank after tank pushed through artillery fire. Infantry followed, using the terrain for cover. But American gunners had learned from Kasserine. They fired from concealed positions. They coordinated their shots. They targeted the flanks and rear of enemy tanks. By midday, burning German vehicles littered the battlefield. The advance slowed. Then it stopped. The 10th Panzer Division had expected another easy victory over inexperienced Americans. Instead, they had met a disciplined, determined defense. Patton's command style. Patton was everywhere. He visited frontline units. He inspected gun crews. He demanded constant readiness. Soldiers feared his temper, but respected his leadership. Unlike previous commanders, Patton enforced strict discipline, demanded proper uniforms, insisted on aggressive defense, refused to accept excuses. Morale improved. The men believed in their mission. And for the first time, they believed in themselves. The second German assault. The Germans were not finished. On March 24, they launched a renewed attack with heavier forces. More tanks. More artillery. More pressure. This time, they attempted to flank American positions through rough terrain. But US artillery was ready. Observers directed fire with deadly accuracy. Shells slammed into advancing columns. German tanks were hit from multiple angles. The desert echoed with explosions. By the end of the day, German losses were severe. Their offensive momentum was broken. Air power joins the fight. Allied aircraft soon entered the battle. American and British fighters and bombers attacked German supply lines and troop concentrations. Convoys were destroyed. Fuel dumps burned. Communications were disrupted. The Axis forces at El Guettar were now fighting without air superiority. This gave the Americans a critical advantage. Italian forces in the battle. Italian units also took part in the fighting, supporting the German advance. However, their equipment was inferior, and their morale was weaker. Many Italian soldiers fought bravely, but they lacked the heavy armor and firepower needed to break American defenses. Their attacks failed to achieve meaningful gains. The turning point. By March 25, it was clear that the Axis offensive had failed. German commanders realized they could not break through El Guettar without unacceptable losses. Their tanks were damaged. Their infantry was exhausted. Their supply lines were under constant air attack. They began to withdraw. The Americans had held. What El Guettar proved. El Guettar was more than just a tactical victory. It proved that US troops could defeat experienced German forces. Patton's leadership was effective. Discipline and preparation mattered. The lessons of Kasserine had been learned. For the first time in North Africa, American soldiers felt confident facing the Wehrmacht. Patton's reputation soared. Casualties and cost. The battle was not cheap. American forces suffered hundreds of casualties. German losses were also heavy, especially in armored vehicles. The desert was left scarred with wrecked tanks, shattered guns, and shallow graves. War had claimed its price. The road to Tunisia. After El Guettar, the Axis position in Tunisia continued to weaken. Allied forces pressed forward. Supply shortages crippled German units. Air superiority shifted decisively to the Allies. By May 1943, Axis forces in North Africa surrendered. Over 250,000 German and Italian soldiers were captured. North Africa was liberated. Patton's legacy at El Guettar. For Patton, El Guettar was a personal triumph. It proved that his strict discipline worked. His aggressive mindset was effective. American forces could fight and win. The victory helped pave the way for his later commands in Sicily, France, and Germany. El Guettar was not his most famous battle, but it may have been his most important. Final reflection. The Battle of El Guettar was not a grand, sweeping victory like Normandy or the Battle of the Bulge. It was a hard, grinding fight in a dusty valley most people have never heard of. But its impact was enormous. It marked the moment when the US Army stopped learning how to fight and started learning how to win. And at the center of it all stood George S. Patton. Demanding, relentless, uncompromising. The desert had tested him. He passed.